Hello and welcome to Headspace, the show where we discuss the week's top stories with Min's editor Sukumar Ranganathan. Sukumar, welcome to the show. It's been an action-packed week. While the government is all set to win the FDI vote in the parliament, in a diplomatic hurdle, one of its companies, GMR Infrastructure, has lost a deal in Maldives to operate an airport. On a lighter front, Apple iTunes has finally launched in India. Let's quickly start by talking about the GMR deal, Sukumar. What do you make of the Indian government's efforts to fight for GMR in Maldives?
It's a tough question to answer, right? Because what can a government do? Right? Let's look at the Vodafone case, for instance. The UK lobbied heavily. They sent letters. The people who came here, any British leader who came here, made the same kind of pitch.
Right.
Or you look at the Systema issue, right, where the reports suggest that Putin himself deferred his visit and as a way of showing displeasure at the way the Indian government has dealt with it. Have we gone to that extent? Clearly not. But have we, behind the channels, gone out and said the things that need to be said and all that? I'm sure we have. But there is, one thing that I'm still very unclear on, right? And that is the merits of the case, right? It's still not clear, when you look at
what spurned this entire thing.
Is it a sweetheart deal? Of course it is, right? Because let's be very clear, you look at the economics of the deal, it's a great deal. And did the new government believe that it was a sweetheart deal, and as a result did it scrap it? Maybe it did. Is it within its powers to scrap it? Definitely, I would think so, because that's what happens, right? You look at the whole Enron issue in India. Another sweetheart deal which got scrapped.
Right.
So I think the important thing is for the government to assure itself that it's on the right side, that it's saying the right things for the right cause. Because when you are a sovereign nation and you're trying to actually tell another sovereign nation what it should be doing and what it shouldn't be doing because it affects the rights of a company which is incorporated in India, it affects the rights of an Indian company, you better be sure that the Indian company is in the right.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I think that's probably the kind of thinking that's guided the government's response.
Right. So what are the options left with GMR now that, the Indian sort of government's plea or sort of, its diplomatic interference has not worked? What can the company really do now?
The company itself, I would think their options are limited, right? There are international legal options, of course, right? But it's very difficult to take on a sovereign state in an international court of law. But I'm sure that if they're desperate enough and if they're pushed enough, they will go out and do it. I sense, especially from the fact that they formed this committee, which along with representatives of the government is overseeing the handover of the project, I get the sense that they've probably said, okay, it's gone. And what kind of compensation will we get? So maybe those are the kind of things that they need to look forward to now.
Right. Is it a loss of face for India in any which way?
I don't think so. I don't think it's a loss of face. You must understand that, Maldives, which is an Asian country, or if you look at a lot of African countries, the regulatory environment is fluid, much like it's fluid in India. Right? In India, laws change. In fact, we try to change some laws retrospectively.
Very recently.
And that's a political risk. That's a change of regime risk that all companies that are trying to do such things need to weave into their calculations. And I think as Indian companies try to go more global in parts of Asia and parts of Africa, they'll realize the importance and the significance of doing that.
Right. So back home, the government seems all set to win the FDI vote in the parliament today. What does it mean for the sentiments in the market, considering that, the Sensex yesterday touched a 19-month high?
I think it's a winning any vote, which at the end of the day concerns reforms in some way, is a good thing. And I think what this victory shows, never mind how it was achieved, right? I think this is a case where the means aren't important. It's the end that is important. So don't look at how they did it. But the fact is, they won it in the Lok Sabha, the vote in the Lok Sabha, and they'll probably win it in the Rajya Sabha when the voting happens. And this should give the government confidence to push through critical reforms, because I personally don't think FDI in retail was a big reform, where its impact is going to be muted. It's going to
Hasn't
happen
been in a
over a
proposal
period.
so
Yeah,
far.
and it's going to take a long period of
Right.
time. So it's not something that we should sort of celebrate as a big reform. But I think what we should celebrate is the fact that the government got it through. It showed commitment in getting it through,
Right.
which should give it the confidence that if it wants to get other reform measures through Parliament, it can.
Right.
The flip side, of course, is that BJP, the main opposition party, is obviously going to be very upset. They will try to stall the government at every step. So it's going to be...
They've been doing so far.
Yeah, they've been doing so far, and I think that process may increase, which means the scope for any significant
further reform process.
legislative process in Parliament is limited.
As it is, there's so few sessions left before the elections.
Yeah.
Right? What does this vote, in terms of the numbers that the government has achieved, tell us about government standing right now? Because it's won with a very small majority. So ahead of the elections, what kind of signals is it giving?
It doesn't matter, right? Whether it's we all know this is in some ways a minority government, right? In some ways, and the biggest learning from this whole thing, or the way one should really look at it, is the fact that no one seems ready for elections, right? Which is one reason why fundamentally the voting also seems to have happened in the way it has happened. No one wants to have the general elections right now. The other thing it tells you is that both the parties are sort of, you can see formations already beginning to happen in some way.
Yeah, so
right?
sorting themselves. Yeah.
And the two parties which played a central role in this vote are really the SP and the BSP.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that these are the same two parties which will also play a central role in 2014.
Right.
So I think a lot of activity that you will see in the political front between now and 2014, and some people say the elections could even be in 2013,
right,
will be related to this.
At least they've got some two key reforms, cash transfers and FDI in retail going, right? Let's talk about something on a lighter note. Apple iTunes has launched in India after a long gap. What do you think it means for the Indian music and movies industry, which is sort of, largely dominated by pirated stuff?
It's not going to mean the end of piracy, right? So there's no way that's going to happen. So,
right.
And I'm also not very convinced that it's going to make a big difference in the movies business,
okay,
right? But I'm convinced that it's going to make a huge difference in the music business, in 2 or 3 segments. I have a feeling that people who listen to classical music, whether it's Western classical or Indian classical, as well as people who listen to the standard rock and roll kind of stuff, and who are willing to pay for this music simply because it's not available here.
Right,
a lot of
easily,
music you don't get in India. Will probably find that this is an easy way to get that music.
Right.
It doesn't cost much. Their pricing is very smart, which is very interesting for me, because if you typically look at Apple's pricing for its hardware products in India,
it's not meant for India.
It's not. They simply it's a direct conversion.
Right.
Whereas in this case, they seem to have sort of understood what the market is ready to pay.
Yeah.
So 12 rupees to 15 rupees a song, is less than almost a fourth of the 99 cents that they charge for
a song in the US.
So I think it's very, very attractive pricing. It's very competitive pricing. I think it will have a huge impact in that segment of music. Music's gone digital. The CD business is dead.
Right.
Vinyls are making a comeback, but that's among a very, very small niche.
Yeah.
And I think this will just accelerate the process. 12 to 15 rupees is kind of money that anyone can afford to pay. You get an album for 100 rupees or 120 rupees, which is again very, very affordable especially when you compare it to the price of imported CDs that most of these people who listen to the kind of music I was describing end up paying. So I think it will change the dynamics of that business.
Right.
I'm not so sure about Bollywood music though. Right, because Bollywood music, or for that matter the music of any other local film industry, which is what passes for mainstream music in India, unlike most other countries, where they
Right.
have music is separate and movies is separate.
Right.
Um, Now, one, it's pirated. Two, a lot of this happens over the phone through caller tunes and all that.
Yeah.
And the caller tune rates are still smaller, are still lower than the rates that iTunes is charging. So I'm not so sure it'll happen with Bollywood music, but it'll happen with other
Right.
kinds of music.
So even on a small scale, at least it's introducing some people to a legitimate way of downloading music and movies.
Yeah, but let's be sure of one thing. This doesn't mean the end of piracy, right?
It will continue on a large
that
scale.
will continue to happen, and that happens all over the world. So it's
Right.
not going to change.
Right.
But what it does do is it provides an avenue for people who listen to certain kinds of music to get that kind of music, to access that kind of music easily. And I think that's a huge impact. My sense is these are people who are typically a little older than the 15-year-olds and the 20-year-olds who listen to pop music that's very, very pop, right, which is popular and current, as in flavor
Right.
of the month.
Right.
And I think these people might be able to pay a bit more, and they're also far more what I'd like to call sustainable customers, right? Because they'll keep
Yeah.
coming back and they'll
Yeah.
keep buying. You'll have to wait and see, but I think the music business will do very well.
Right, right. Let's hope more such services are launched, looking at the way Apple is operating in India. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sukumar. That's all we have for you in today's edition of EdSpace. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more.